right, we can start by saying our blessing. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'nasan Lanu Es Toraso Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. We just said was a blessing because we're about to learn Torah, God's word. Just like before you eat God's food, you're supposed to make a blessing which acknowledges it's his and asks his permission to partake of it. So there's no greater food we have than Torah. Torah is the food of our soul. It's actually the only food of our soul. The only food that feeds our soul is Torah study. So when we study his work before then, we also have to make a blessing. We don't do it each time. We do it once a day. People say it in the morning, but now, in case not everyone did, we say it before we learn. And then once you make a blessing, you got to eat. So therefore, right away, we choose to say a verse of Torah. And I chose the verse of Shema, because Shema is a verse that we all know. That's a very significant verse expressing the absolute unity of God, which of course we speak about a lot in this class. So now we can get back to what we're discussing, which are these very, very interesting events we're going to see tonight. Very, very significant what happened. So if you remember a week ago, I know it's so nice, Chava said the whole week she thinks about the laws of Shabbos, but I don't know if everyone spends the whole week also thinking about the storyline of what happens here with Rus. So Rus comes home that first day. She had gone out in the morning. She probably had a lot of trepidation. She's a princess. She's going out now as a beggar. She's going out to collect the free handouts for the poor. She's obviously never done anything like this in her life. Of course, neither has her mother-in-law. And her mother-in-law is older and knew more people, so it'd be even more degrading. So she did it herself. And then lo and behold, the owner was really nice. He told her, you know, you could stay in my fields. He sort of created a situation that she got more than she normally would get. She came home with 5 days worth of food. Her mother-in-law sees and says, whoa, what happened today? And she says, oh, he was so nice to me. The owner, what was his name? Boaz. He was really nice to me. He said I should stay here. He was really, really, really nice to me. And that was exactly as far as we got. So what was Naomi's response? So we are in chapter 2, verse 20. Our goal today, this is the fourth session we are doing chapter 2. The introduction took us 2 weeks. Chapter 1 took us 5, and chapter 2 should take us 4, and God willing, we will begin chapter 3. So what was Naomi's response? We're going to see her response. We're going to see what happens for the rest of the harvest, and we're going to see what happens after the harvest is over, which is chapter 3. So Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of God for not failing in his kindness to the living or the dead. And now she tells her, because how would Rus know? The man is closely related to us, Naomi then said to her. He is one of our redeeming, I'll explain to you what this means, redeeming kinsmen. So what is going on here? So there's different opinions among the sages was the subject of this verse when Naomi says, oh, wow, blessed be he of God for not failing in his kindness. Who is she talking about here that didn't fail in his kindness, not to the living or the dead? Who do you think she's talking about?
Boaz.
Boaz. What could be another? Probably Boaz. Most commentators assume it's Boaz. What could be the other option? Who didn't fail in his kindness to the living or the dead?
Hashem.
Or God. So probably Boaz, but this might have been a reference to God, or it might have been a reference, of course, to both. So if we're assuming it's Boaz, because the majority assumption is Naomi is praising Boaz for not, it's very interesting, actually. You could see from here, Naomi was so humble. Because here she has this really rich relative. I mean, it's her nephew. That's quite a close relative. And he's like the richest man in Judah, which probably meant the richest man in the whole Israel. He was the judge of the entire country. She is so impoverished that they literally had to go and gather the free falling grains And he says, oh, make sure you stay in my fields and feel free to gather. And she's like, he's so nice. That's pretty holy. Instead of saying, hello, this is all you could do for me. Do you know how many poor we supported when we had money? Do you know how many poor officially you support? You have money and you're just saying, oh, you could collect grains by me. But that wasn't her attitude at all. Really, it shows a tremendous character. I don't know if I would withstand such a test. I don't know. God never put me in such a test. But to say, instead of being upset at how little he was giving, when literally Rus came to his door, she was in his backyard collecting in his fields. Naomi is, wow, he's being so kind. It's so nice that he's extending himself and helping you gather these grains. So when you gather the handout to the poor that she's allowed because she's so poor, you gathered enough for 5 days. Wow, he is so kind. And she's saying Boaz is being kind with the living and the dead. Obviously, the living is Rus and Naomi. And the dead is obviously their relatives. Rus's husband, Machlon, remember, Boaz's cousin. Naomi's husband, Elimelech, Boaz's uncle, because he's taking care of us. So he's being kind to the living and the dead. That's the normative way of understanding this. A little more allegorically, perhaps she meant he's helping us now. We're the living. And what do you think she was sort of hoping, by saying, and he's so kind to the dead? What could she have been implying or hoping or praying? What's that kindness to the dead we've mentioned several times already?
Her son, like him marrying her so that they can have his children spiritually.
Exactly. Perhaps the implication was he's going to be kind to the dead, because if he marries you, this is the greatest kindness he could do for my dead son, Machlon, because if the two of you have a child, that will be spiritually carrying on Machlon's memory. So he's being very kind now to the living, and God willing, he's going to be kind to the dead. Again, that is one understanding of these words. Another commentator says that what Naomi meant was, like, she said, you know what, honestly, I've been wondering where Boaz has been hiding himself. I mean, here we have this relative, a very close relative, who's very wealthy and very charitable, and he's ignored us since we came here. And I was wondering what was with him. But now I see that he truly is being kind to us. And I truly now with my whole heart can bless him. Instead of being upset with him, I take this as his kindness, which again, to me is like such a testimony to her character, that she accepted this as kindness. She sincerely meant it. She wasn't being like sarcastic. She sincerely viewed this as he's being so kind, and this washed away whatever maybe negativity or feeling she had, like, why isn't he here for us in our hour of need? And again, according to some who she was really praising, and it's not a contradiction, both are true, was God, who's really the one that's being kind to us. And again, that's always a very important perspective. And I know we've touched on this before, but it's very important and very relevant because it happens all the time in our life. Whenever we receive kindness from another person, it's very important to have a twofold perspective. To have gratitude to the person who's being so kind to you. And we all, wherever we're holding, have hours of need and kindness, and people that are nobodies and nothings, but at that moment, we really need them. I remember I had once, like, just sure, you never know who's gonna be that person. I took my son downtown to, like, I guess the bus station, which probably is not a great area. And some nice gentleman pointed out that one of my tires was really low. And I just wasn't willing to risk going on the highway. So I'm in this, I don't know where the neighborhood was, Sunday morning. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to the closest gas station. I was a little nervous. And I Googled the closest gas station. And I went to the pump, and it didn't take my credit card, and it required cash. I didn't have a penny on me. And I went into that, and I'm like so scared in this neighborhood. Nobody did anything to me, but it was just like psychological. So I go to that little store, And I go to the man, I say, I'm trying and I won't take my credit card. It needs cash. I don't have cash. Can you give me cash for my credit card? And he's like, no, I'm not allowed to do that. And I'm like, I really need cash. I really, really, really need to, fix this tire. And I guess I looked pretty desperate. And he did it for me. He took my credit card and he gave me cash for whatever money he put on the credit card. And I was like so grateful to him. And here's this person, I obviously don't know his name, obviously never seen him since. But at that moment, I really needed his help. And again, I was very grateful to him for obviously being a good person, that he was helping me. And I was very grateful to God, because everything comes from God. All help from God comes from God. And I usually tell a person that like, I'm so grateful to you. You're obviously such a kind person. And I'm so grateful to God, because all is from God, but God chooses good people to do good things through. So the fact that God used you as his tool to help me is just a testimony to what a good person you are. So therefore, it's very appropriate looking at what's happening here and understanding these two dimensions of how we view this verse as praising and thanking God, as praising and thanking Boaz, that obviously both are true. Obviously, she was grateful to Boaz, and obviously she was grateful to God, because God is the one that's orchestrating the script. Now, then she said a phrase that you might understand what she means, but maybe probably we've never really touched on this exact idea, but it's relevant in this whole discussion that we've had several times. So she said, oh, he's so close to us. Like she wanted to impress on Rus that this person's very close relative. Relative, he could be your third cousin also. It's also a relative. He's our redeeming relative, a redeeming kinsman. What does it mean, a redeeming relative? What it means is that he is considered in a line of next of kin, to the degree that if there's a person who's so poor that he has to sell his fields, the law is that if a close relative to redeem it, because a person, again, in the biblical Torah perspective, your fields are forever. And of course, they come back to you in the Jubilee year, in the Yovel year. And therefore, if someone has to sell his fields, that's a very, very great deprivation. That shows tremendous, tremendous distress. And therefore, if a relative of yours sells their fields and they're a close enough relative, you should take it upon yourself to buy them back for him. And Naomi is identifying to Rus, he is so close to us. He's not just a relative. You got a lot of second cousins. No, he's a redeeming kinsman. He should, again, they hadn't sold their fields. The reason why they were so poor, even though they obviously had these ancestral fields, was because, as you said, by the time they came, it was right at the time of the harvest. They couldn't plant anything at that point. It was too late in the game. They couldn't get anything out of it. But if we were to sell our fields, he would have this obligation to try to buy them back for us. That's what we mean by redeeming kinsmen. And now she said, I'm not questioning him, because until now, again, I was a little like, the verse clearly says, don't hide yourself from your flesh, which means don't hide yourself from relatives that are poor. And we're relatives and we're poor. And he wasn't doing anything for us. But I see now he is. Of course, on a more allegorical level, saying this redeeming kinsman is an allusion to a redeemer, which of course is the Mashiach, the ultimate redeemer, that's going to descend from this relative through us. So Naomi was very excited. And of course, what do you think was going on in the back of her head? What do you think she was thinking already at this moment, now that she saw that Boaz was being nice to Rus? Like my mind also, it jumps 5 steps ahead. A little something, and I'm already like, 5 steps ahead. So what do you think Naomi was thinking at this point?
That he can marry Ruth?
Exactly. So until now, she didn't go in that direction, because Boaz had honestly ignored them. They came, and Boaz didn't even give them a blanket, a loaf of bread. He gave them nothing. So in her heart of hearts, she had no hopes that Boaz, who's 80 years old, who just lost his wife, who's rich, and there's again this question, a Moabite convert, So for all of these reasons, Naomi didn't even go there. Like, why open up your heart to something that's just stupidity? But now there's a little flicker. It's a very little flicker, but it doesn't take much for us to get excited. So because of this little flicker, that Rus, hand of God, landed in his field, that he, hand of God, happened to come to the field, and that he was so nice to her, there's a little hope that maybe he will marry her. Even though he's 80, just lost his wife. She's a Moabite convert, a little questionable. Maybe this was going to happen. It was a very, very exciting thought. And obviously the excitement for her was on two levels. Why do you think she cared so much that Boaz should marry Rus? Why would she have wanted that?
For her son's legacy.
For her son, exactly. This idea of Boaz marrying Rus, again, in this, as we call it, a Levirate marriage, is really the fulfillment of her dead son's legacy, that now they could have a child, even though Boaz is quite old, but if they have a child, that child is spiritually her son's child, spiritually is carrying on her son's energy. And I believe she also wanted it for Rus. That Rus should be set up with a good man, a righteous man, a financially very stable man, that her daughter-in-law, who she cared about very, very much, should be lifted out of this horrific. Nobody's probably felt so bad. Here's her daughter-in-law, who was a princess, who lived her whole life with whatever luxuries princesses had in those days, and whatever comforts they were given in those days. And when she was married to Machlon started off as a very wealthy man. And she's so destitute that she's gathering the grains that get dropped in the field. So for sure, she wanted her daughter-in-law to have a good life, to be married to a good person, to be married to someone that could take care of her. So on both levels, she was really hoping against hope that Boaz would want this. It was hoping against hope because his age, and she's a Moabite. Not just a regular convert. A regular convert, okay, it's a very big merit to help a convert, but she's a Moabite. And that was a big, black mark here. But she was hoping maybe something's going to happen. He said she should stay in the fields. Maybe he's going to come to the fields. Maybe he's going to start talking to her. Maybe he'll see what a wonderful girl she is. Maybe he'll decide to be kind and have this marriage with her. So she was sort of hoping something was going to happen during the harvest time when Rus was in the fields. We'll see if anything does. So Rus continues and said, she's continuing the conversation. And Rus the Moabite said, what's more, he even said to me, listen to what Rus says, because it's not what Boaz said. So I want you to catch the discrepancy. Stay close to my workers until they have finished all my harvest. Is that what Boaz told her? Stay close to my workers until they have finished all my harvest. What did he say a little different than how Rus said it? You can look back if you have, I know Rachel has, I don't know if anyone else has a text in front of them to see what he really said. He didn't say stay close to my workers. What did he say? Anyone remember? If you look back, he said to her, let me find the verse. Quite a while back. I have to find it's a while back. All the way back. In verse 8, Boaz said to Rus, hear me well, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field, and don't leave here, but stay here close to my maidens. Meaning stay close to the other women as they're gathering. That was verse 8. When Rus gives this over innocently to Naomi, he said stay close to the workers. That means the men, until they finish all the harvest. So everyone's wondering what's going on here. That's not what Boaz said. Why did she switch it? What was going on in her lips or in her mind for him to say clearly, stay close to the women that are gathering? And she said, stay close to the men that are working, which right away Naomi knew didn't make any sense. As we see, Naomi corrects her in the next verse. Naomi didn't hear Boaz, but she knew that didn't make any sense. So there's lots and lots and lots of different interpretations on it. I'm not going to give you all of them. I'll just give you a few. So some say, oh, this means Rus was a real Moabite, meaning a Moabite implying, even though of course she had converted and even though she was a very, very holy person, but there was still a little bit of that Moabite energy in her, which was, she was still a little touched by the immorality of her upbringing. So it just slipped out of her mouth that way because that was the norm in her brain, even though she was refined and worked on herself and modest, very deliberately with a lot of effort, but your roots come out every once in a while. So it was just an expression of her roots, which of course is a lesson to us because, sometimes you think, oh, you're past that. You wouldn't do that anymore. You changed, you grew, you worked on yourself, you refined yourself, but sometimes those roots still come out. So that's one way of understanding it. It's a little hard for us to understand that though, because we know that Rus was very, very, very holy. And that's clear throughout this whole story and throughout everything anybody ever says about her. So even though it was only her roots that slipped on her tongue, it still seems a little strange. So others say, no, what it means in Moabite was in the Moabite language, it wasn't gender oriented. And therefore for a Moabite to say the boys or the girls, so to speak, in the third person form, it would be the same word. So she didn't realize, and she said, the men really meaning the women because in her language it didn't make a difference. Some say, yes, she didn't mean men workers, she just meant sort of the people in the field, men, women, just hang out in that field. Another level, some say that Rus had just heard the good news that actually they were saying that Moabite women could marry Jews. Of course, she knew Moabite men could not. So she sort of was trying to tell this to Naomi in a delicate way. So instead of explicitly saying, I just heard the news that I could get married, she said, oh, he said stay near the men, i.e., I could be near a man. I could get married to a Jewish man. And there are many other explanations on this because everybody wonders what's going on here. But in the next verse, we see Naomi corrects her. So Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Rus, it is fine, my daughter, that you go out with his young women so that you will not be annoyed in another field. So it's interesting because the verse says clearly said to her daughter-in-law, but when she's referring to her, she says my daughter, which was very deliberate, that you see that Naomi had a lot of love for Rus, and Rus obviously had a lot of love for Naomi. And so Naomi, if Rus was trying to hint that the sages say Naomi got the point. She said, great, I'm really glad that you can get married. You could stay within the fold. And yes, you could stay with his maidens, meaning maybe, according to how some interpret Boaz's words or how Naomi understood Boaz's words, was that he was saying, don't go back to Naomi. You don't have to schlep back every day. Stay here for the duration of the harvest among the other women that are gathering and staying by the fields, which some say she did and some say she didn't do. Some say she did for the rest of the harvest stay with those women. It was a few more days. She had already brought her mother-in-law a lot of food. And some say no, even though Boaz offered that she could sleep there with the other women, every night she walked back to be with her mother-in-law. So she stayed close to Boaz's young women to glean until the end of the barley harvest and of the wheat harvest. And then she stayed at home with her mother-in-law. All right, and that is the end of chapter 2. The harvest is over. Rus comes back to Naomi. How do you think Naomi feels at this point? Based on what I told you earlier, how do you think she feels? Naomi was so excited, and Rus hangs out in Boaz's field every day. She gathers all the barley that fell. She gathers all the wheat that fell. And the harvest is over, and Naomi and Rus comes back to Naomi. How's Naomi feel now?
Probably not. She was like probably hoping that he would have said something to her.
So how do you think she feels?
I would say, I don't know, very anticipatory.
Anticipatory, but what do you think? So there are those sages that say that anticipatory, but maybe a little or a lot. Like, put yourself in Naomi's place. These are real people. She might have felt very disappointed, but she might have been anticipatory if she's a hopeful, positive person. If she's more of a negative person, she just felt very disappointed. But if she was a little more positive, she could have felt hopeful. So why would she be really disappointed?
Then nothing had happened yet.
Nothing happened. This is a golden opportunity. Like, in other words, when is this ever going to happen again? Like, just understand the social status here. She and Rus are the poor of the poor. Boaz is the leader of the entire Jewish people. There's not going to be like these common social gatherings they're going to meet. God arranged the whole thing. Did you ever have this happen in your life? It's like a perfect setup for something. All the pieces are lined up, and then whatever you're thinking doesn't happen. You've experienced it? I've experienced that. Like, it's like, oh, I totally see God's hand. He worked it all out. You're so excited. Everything's worked out. And nothing happens. That's how Naomi felt. Look at the hand of God here. I don't know what happened to man, but God was doing his part. Rus happens to wind up in his field, and Boaz happens to be there that day. And Boaz says to her, stay in this field. Don't go anywhere else. For the duration of the harvest, stay in my field. I mean, obviously, that's like almost inviting her like to be really close. And Rus stays in the field every day. And that's it. There's no more encounters between Rus and Boaz. Nothing happening. No private conversations, no talks. We don't know if Boaz ever shows up again to his field. If he does, he totally ignores her. So Naomi was really devastated. Now, some say, as Bathsheba said, that she was a little hopeful. She's, like you start making excuses in your brain. She's like, well, during the harvest, he's so busy. It's such a busy time. Hey, I mean, you can't in the middle of the harvest go talk to Rus, but as soon as it's over, he's going to. So guess what? It was over and nothing happened. She's like, maybe now, maybe today. Maybe today, maybe today. How long are you keep saying maybe today? It didn't happen. So Naomi is like feeling quite desperate. She's going quite desperate because she knows this is the chance, and this is the only chance. Not going to happen again. We're going to wait another year for another harvest, and maybe then he's going to be inspired. Not going to happen. Here he noticed her. He was nice to her. He did special favors for her. And that's it. The whole thing fizzled out. Nothing happened. She really wanted this marriage. She really wanted this marriage to happen.
So she can go speak to him.
So that's an interesting point from us. So if Naomi wanted it so much, why didn't Naomi, I mean, she is Boaz's aunt, why didn't Naomi go speak to Boaz about this beautiful shidduch, this beautiful suggestion she has for him? Any ideas why you think she didn't do that directly? She didn't. Why do you think she didn't? Any ideas? Just try to think of it in really human, real terms. Why she wouldn't go and what would be her hesitation of speaking to Boaz about it?
To not make him feel uncomfortable, maybe.
Well, why would he be uncomfortable?
Because they are poor.
Because they're poor, and also, what else is the big demerit here?
And she's Moabite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Naomi didn't know how Boaz would handle this idea of her being a Moabite convert. Like, she sort of heard, like Rus sort of heard, no, it's okay. A woman's okay. A man's not. But it was all very like vague. And also, to be honest, there's rules and then there's how people view things. So even if according to the letter of the law, you're allowed to marry a Moabite convert, but it definitely wasn't looked at with a benign eye. The Moabites were still the enemies. Okay, I mean, she's a convert. She's Jewish. Yeah, but, she's a Moabite. So the poor probably was something to approach a shidduch of the leader of the whole generation, the wealthiest man of the generation, saying, I have this wonderful girl for you. She's absolutely destitute. Could be a little insulting. And that she was a Moabite, Naomi had no clue how he was going to view this Moabite issue. So that's why we're told Naomi didn't do what would be normal, go herself or ask a shadchan to go and suggest this proposal. You know, she was just scared Boaz could get really upset, could be really insulted, could think it's really impudent of her to even suggest something like that to him. She needed something a little more out of the box than that. She needed to create a situation. Now again, I want to put this whole chapter in perspective, because without the perspective, it's going to look very inappropriate what Naomi tells Rus to do. So that's why I want you to really understand the caliber of these people. Naomi was a very, very, very holy woman. And Rus is viewed as a very holy woman. Rus is viewed as the most godly convert that there ever was, which is a pretty high status because there are a lot of very holy converts, you know, among the Jewish people. There are many converts that were enormous Torah scholars, enormously righteous, or the Onkelos. You know, he's in almost any chumash you ever find, you're going to find Onkelos. That's a Roman convert. Interesting, the descendants of many very evil people were very great converts. Or sometimes these converts had amazing children, which obviously is a testimony to them, like Rabbi Akiva. He's the son of a convert. And Rabbi Akiva is like the greatest sage the Jews ever had. So obviously, among our history, in general, we view converts as very special people. Converts in general are viewed as holy people, special people. I mean, sincere converts, because they chose to join God's flock. They don't have to. They could serve God sincerely and keep 7 laws, and he's so happy with them. They chose to keep tens and tens of thousands. So converts are viewed in general as special people. And then among converts, we have really outstanding converts that are like, I think Shammai and Naphtali were both converts. They were the leaders of the generation. I mean, like, very amazing people. And yet Rus is considered the holiest of all the converts. So Rus is a very, very, very holy person. And Naomi was considered a very great person. So I want to put that in perspective, that they were very pure and very great. So when you hear what Naomi is going to tell Rus to do, you can understand it within that context. So again, the context is that Naomi's desperate, that Naomi really wants this marriage. As we discussed, she wants the marriage for her dead son Machlon's sake, and she wants the marriage for Rus's sake. If Boaz isn't going to marry her, she doesn't know if anyone's going to. If Boaz has this Moabite hang-up, even if he knows the law, but he still has this Moabite hang-up, well, for sure, everyone else is going to have that Moabite hang-up, because he's obviously the most wise, holy, and learned Jew of that generation. He's the leader. If he is not willing to overcome the hang-up, no one's going to. So is Rus going to be destined to be single for the rest of her life, to be alone for the rest of her life, to be destitute for the rest of her life? So she really wants this marriage for Machlon, and she really wants this marriage for Rus. And like, she's putting all of her eggs in one basket. She sees it's Boaz or nobody. Because if Boaz isn't going to marry her, no one's going to marry her. Not that Boaz said no, so everybody else will say no, but just like, if even Boaz doesn't understand, then nobody's going to understand. So poor Rus, she's going to be destined to be alone. What happens after Naomi passes away? Rus is going to be literally alone. It's so sad, so not fair. She's such a wonderful girl, her daughter-in-law. So Naomi really wanted this marriage. And she knew she couldn't go to Boaz directly. Boaz would be like, perhaps, like, what are you talking about? I should marry Naomi. He could just say very simply, I'm 80 years old, you know. Not going to happen. He doesn't even have to go into the like, she's a Moabite. I don't know if I want to marry someone now. I just lost my wife. Like, so she had to think of a way that could just touch him very deeply, like get him totally out of his box, that perhaps he would be open to this suggestion. So with all that, this is what she tells Rus to do. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, we're in the first verse of chapter 3, my daughter, I must seek security for you that it may go well with you. So she's saying, you know, again, she and Rus had sort of both hoped, assumed maybe Boaz would be interested in some marriage would happen. Maybe during the harvest when he sees her, nothing happened. Maybe after the harvest when he's not so busy with the harvest, nothing happened. So she's like, we got to do something to expedite this. We got to do something direct, because if we do something indirect, nothing's going to happen. And she's saying, you know, I view you as my daughter. You know, the normal state of affairs is a mother-in-law, a daughter-in-law, and especially, you know, and if your son passed away, maybe you're not interested in your daughter-in-law remarrying so much. She really, just like a daughter, she really, really, really wanted her to get married. And she really wanted her to marry Boaz. And she was even sort of implying to her, you might think you're going to marry an 80-year-old man. I mean, again, Naomi wasn't 20, but she was 40. And Rus was 40. Boaz was 80. So Naomi thought maybe Rus isn't going to be willing to marry an 80-year-old. You know, you could do another ceremony called chalitza and just take off the shoe and a whole ceremony. Like maybe she's going, I'm going to marry an 80-year-old man. I'm 40. I've still got plenty of years ahead of me. But she was saying, I'm viewing you as my daughter. This is what I would hope for my daughter. Boaz is such a holy person. He's so righteous. He's so good. It's going to be such a merit to be married to him. It'd be such a merit to have his child. Don't view him as like an 80-year-old old man. No, there's nothing better than being married to a very holy person. That's not just for this temporal life. This is for all eternity. This is going to be your husband. It's worth it. And I'm looking for security for you, because until you're married, you're not going to have that security. Or on a more esoteric level, it's explained that when someone's married and their husband passes away, their dead husband's spirit is still like inside of them and not at rest. So it's sort of making her not at rest. And only if the woman remarries, when a new husband's spirit joins with hers, the previous husband's spirit leaves. So Naomi is saying to Rus, I know Machlon spirit is still inside of you, because, you know, you're not married to anyone else yet. And I know it's not at rest. It's like it's a not comfortable state. And I know you're never going to be at rest until you have another husband, that then this will allow that spirit to leave. So this is really the way you're going to find real rest, is if you have another husband, and then that will it'll quiet that spiritual turmoil inside of you. And she's saying, I'm really doing this because I care about you. Obviously, it'd be nice for my son if you got married and had a child, and that would be in his memory. But honestly, I'm doing this because I care about you, which of course was very, very, very true in this situation. We know how deeply they both cared about each other. So therefore, this is what I want you to do. Now, Boaz, I'm reading verse 2. Boaz, our relative, with whose maidens you have been for this whole time, and he didn't talk to you at all, will be winnowing barley tonight on the threshing floor. Therefore, bathe and anoint yourself, get dressed in your most beautiful clothing, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. I want you to go to the threshing floor. I want you to look gorgeous, and I don't want him to know you're there. Now, why was Boaz in the threshing floor? Because it was a pretty lawless generation, as we know. The people weren't. That was the reason why, of course, there was that famine for so many years. So there was definitely the possibility of robbery taking place. Here we had just had this huge harvest. Now you could say he himself is guarding his grain. He's 80 years old. You think he could have hired a few loyal men to watch the granary. But it says that the righteous know that within the physical items is like almost their responsibility to God. It's the sparks of energy that they're supposed to be involved with. And therefore the righteous themselves will personally take care of those possessions. Those possessions are important to them because within those possessions is this God energy that they're supposed to be moving the physical to spiritual with by serving God with the physical. So Naomi understood that Boaz was going to be there that night, personally watching the grain, personally watching it because of the thieves, and personally watching it because as a righteous person, he was supposed to value all of this that God had given him to take care of. So she had a plot in mind. As I said, a little bit of an out-of-the-box plot. So let's look at some of the specificity of the wording here of the verse, and then we'll go on to see what Naomi's plot was. So she tells her, bathe, right? If we look at the instruction she gave here, bathe, anoint yourself, get dressed in your beautiful clothing, and go down to that threshing floor. So the question is, what is she telling her to wash herself for? I mean, Rus is 40 years old. She probably took showers or whatever they cleansed themselves in those days. We're not worried that she was not hygienic. So what was she telling her to bathe herself for? So the Midrash says that she meant it in a very spiritual way. Like right now, I'm really trying to move you to a certain spiritual stature. I'm really trying to make this marriage happen. So wash yourself away of any impurities that could still be clinging to you. Of course, Rus was a convert. This is 3 months after she left Moab. Of course, she converted 10 years before, and now she passed the test 3 months ago, so the conversion was 100% valid. It really always was valid. Retroactively, we knew it was always a valid conversion, but now it's been 3 months. But just in case there's anything still clinging to, any Moabite traces, cleanse yourself of all of them. You're coming to a whole new stature here. It's actually interesting because one of the sources comment that a convert isn't free of his original impurities for 3 months following conversion. So as we said, this is now 3 months after she left Moab. Now again, she really converted 10 years earlier. But this second time conversion was coming even from a much deeper place because there was nothing in it for her. She didn't have a husband, she didn't have anything, and she still clung to God. So this is almost a renewal of the conversion. Now it's 3 months later. So this is okay, now take this ritual bath, immerse in the mikveh, in the ritual bath, and be completely free of any residue of anything. Or we can interpret this that she wasn't telling her to go to the ritual bath, but literally to bathe, which of course we happened to discuss, I think 2 weeks ago, that it's one of the things we do before the Sabbath, right? We've discussed how there's special preparations we make before the Sabbath, and one of them is bathing, because the Sabbath is a very holy day and we're honoring it with a clean body and clothing and home and everything. So it's almost perhaps, so one way of looking at this is that Naomi was telling Rus, ritually bathe, immerse in a mikvah to cleanse any traces, shards, residue of any impurity, because this is all to lift you to a whole new, very spiritual level. Or similar but very different, she was telling her to literally take a bath, not a bath because she thought she was dirty, but just like we prepare for the Sabbath with a bath, many of you shower every morning, and then you shower in the afternoon to prepare for the Sabbath. So did you get dirty between the morning and the afternoon? Not likely, but it's a special shower to greet the Sabbath with. So she was saying similarly, take this special washing oneself to prepare yourself like we prepare for the Sabbath for something very solemn and significant. Anoint yourself with perfume. On the simple level, the Midrash says, anoint yourself with good deeds and righteous conduct, meaning she was creating a very big gamble. This, as I said, was very out of the box. And Naomi, this was a big gamble, because Naomi could have been more conventional and girded herself up with her courage and gone to Boaz and present this shidduch, this matrimonial idea. And she was like, nah, I can't do that. He could get really insulted. He's never going to listen to me. But this was like a gamble. Either it's going to really win or it's going to really lose. So she was saying, anoint yourself, perfume yourself with all of your good deeds, that this should work. And also she was saying, I'm going to be part of the process. not only am I telling you that you should know you're walking with all of your merits, you're also walking with all of mine. And that's very significant. It's very real. It's interesting. I'm reminded of a story. The third Lubavitcher Rebbe, who's known as a Tzemach Tzedek, he had 7 sons, and he was very, very especially close to the 7th, who actually was his successor after him. And when it came time for the 7th to get married, I guess it was his mother-in-law, said she had a shidduch she wanted. She wanted her granddaughter to marry this youngest son of the Tzemach Tzedek. Age-wise, it was compatible. And she had she was talking about 2, obviously the Tzemach Tzedek is also her grandson, but she didn't mean the Tzemach Tzedek. She meant she had 2 granddaughters whose mother had died when they were very young. The father had remarried, but instead of being raised by their stepmother, they were raised by their grandmother. So these are 2 sisters that are orphans, that are penniless. They have good, as we call it, yichus. They come from very noble stock, but they don't have anything else that's, so to speak, going to be the cash for their marriage. And she was she was their grandmother, and she raised them as a mother because her daughter passed away when they were both very young. So she really wanted them to get a good marriage. So she said to her son-in-law, the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe, about his youngest son and very beloved, I'd like one of my granddaughters to marry this grandson of mine. I'd like one of my granddaughters that I've raised as these poor orphans to marry your son. And the Tzemach Tzedek says, like, what's going to be the dowry? You know, in those days, a match like that was made with a dowry. This is a very, very illustrious man. And you're going to put something on the table, which is why we're going to make this shidduch work. So what did this woman say? She didn't have any money. She didn't have any money to offer, but she really wanted her granddaughters to make a really good marriage. She said, I will give him, meaning she's going to give him Reb Marash, all of my merits of being the wife of the Rebbe. I will give him all of my merits of being the wife of a Rebbe. And Tzemach Tzedek said, it's a deal. That's worth more than any money anyone could give me, is that my son should have all of those merits. And with that, Rebbe Rivka married the Reb Marash. And the Tzemach Tzedek found a good shidduch for the other girl as well. So somewhat akin to that, it's reminding me this when Naomi is saying, she's saying what you're going to do is difficult, but you're doing because I'm telling you to do it. And she listened to her mother-in-law and did it. If she thought it was right or she thought it was crazy, she did it. But Naomi is telling her you're anointing yourself. You're not going alone. You're going with all of your merits. Obviously, this tremendous merit of being a convert, this tremendous merit of having not gone back to the easy life of the princess in the palace and instead becoming this very destitute Jew. And you're going with all of my merits. And those are the merits that are going to anoint you and beautify you and make this crazy plan work. And then she said, get dressed in your beautiful clothing. So actually some say this must refer to her, like what beautiful clothing did she have? She was so poor. It must refer to her Shabbos clothing, from which the sages learn, actually based on this verse, that a person always has an obligation to have special clothing for the Sabbath, for Shabbos, because obviously they were very poor. It's not like she went into her closet and looked from her 6 outfits. She had her clothing, and then she had something that was her Shabbos clothing. So that must be what Naomi meant. Whatever is your special Shabbos clothing, put that on. And from which we learn that even a very poor person should have something special for Shabbos. And again, also this idea of dressing you based on the grammar, it says like Naomi was saying, I'm going to dress you with my merits. Again, the same idea we just said before. She's saying, don't worry, you're not going to be just dressed with your own merits. I'm giving you all my merits. So your merits and my merits, this should work. So, all right. So what's supposed to happen now? Okay. So Naomi is telling her, very religious, holy Naomi is telling her very religious, holy daughter-in-law, a very interesting plan. Remember, because they were Naomi felt very desperate. She felt like I gotta do something really radical. So she says, Boaz is going to be sleeping in the threshing floor tonight. I want you to get dressed beautifully, as we just explained it in both the spiritual way as well. I want you to go to the threshing floor. I don't want anyone to know you're there, because there'll be other men there, obviously, involved in all the threshing stuff. Everyone's going to leave. Boaz is going to go to sleep there for the night. I know he will, because it's not so safe nowadays, and he's a very righteous person, and as such, he's going to personally be guarding his granary. This is what I want you to do. We're up to verse 4. And when he lies down, Boaz is going to go to sleep for the night there. Note the place where he lies. Obviously, it's pitch dark. This is not no electricity, no little light glowing. It was going to be completely dark. He's going to cut the candle, and not going to have any fire, potentially burning down his wheat and his barley. So it's going to be completely dark. Watch. Notice exactly where he lies down. Go over, uncover his feet, and lie down. He will tell you what you're to do. So he's going to go to sleep. There's not going to be anyone else around. I want you to, when he's sleeping, he's not going to notice. Go over to where he's sleeping, uncover his feet, and then you lie down there. And what will be, will be. So you're going to be lying down. He's going to be sleeping. You're uncovering his feet, and you're going to be lying down right next to his feet. Imagine what Boaz thought if he woke up and saw her in the middle of the night. Okay. Now, what was this whole idea of uncover his feet? So again, all these people were far wiser and more astute than most of us are. So uncovering his feet was a subtle way that Naomi was trying to give Boaz a message. I don't want to use her modest here. That might not be the appropriate way to say it in this context, but like a subtle message that she couldn't give him straight, but she was trying to give him. So what would be the message you think in uncovering his feet? Do you remember what I told you? I mentioned it.
Yibam, or isn't that what it's called?
What does that have to do with the feet?
Spitting in the shoe.
So, it's not spinning in the shoe, exactly. Since what is exactly what Naomi was trying to hint to Boaz. Again, Naomi wants Boaz to offer to marry Rus. How does she say that? The whole point is she doesn't want to tell it to him straight because it's rude, because he'll be like, me, the Moabite? Like, what are you talking about? You're so messed up. I should also mess up? So she couldn't say it directly because maybe he's going to be very offended and maybe he's going to think it's very wrong. But she wanted to give him the message. So the uncovering of the feet is like alluding to him, like, what's she doing uncovering his feet for? Boaz, here's this woman lying at your feet. This woman you have an obligation to. She's your dead cousin's wife. Your obligation is to marry her, or, as symbolized by uncovering the feet, to do that ceremony that we call in the Hebrew chalitza, in which she would remove your shoes. Like now she's uncovering your feet. She would remove actually a very special shoe as part of the ceremony, showing there's a complete disengagement. So Boaz, please do one of these two. Of course, Naomi wanted him to do the first, but please, Boaz, do something here for you in your dead cousin's honor.
What advantage is giving, like, what advantage would Ruth have if he does chalitza? Isn't that like complete disengagement?
It's a spiritual advantage. In other words, the idea of yibum would be the real advantage. In other words, there's two concepts of an advantage: to Rus personally and to her dead husband Machlon. To Rus personally, it frees her to marry anyone else, because according to Jewish law, if a woman is in a state where there's someone around who can do either yibum or chalitza, until they do so, she's like stuck. She can't marry anyone else. So, of course, Naomi and Rus would want yibum. They want her to get married. They want her to produce a child from Boaz, and that child should be her dead husband's child. But at least if there's chalitza, there's a hope maybe somebody would marry her. It wouldn't help Machlon, it wouldn't help her dead husband, but it would help her. But again, they didn't really want that, both because the thought was, if Boaz isn't going to marry her, probably no one's going to marry her, because they're going to say she's a Moabite. They're not going to want to marry her. And she's so poor. And she's a Moabite. and in any case, Naomi was really hoping she would marry someone as righteous as Boaz. Because then she would, because she loved Ruth so much, and she felt, even though Boaz was quite old, but if she could produce Boaz's child, this would be such a great special gift for Ruth. In other words, Naomi was looking at it like, this life is temporal, but there's a next life which is eternal. So even if in this world he's 80 years old, you're 40, you have many years to live, he probably doesn't. But once you're married to him, is forever. So isn't it special to be married to such a holy person? And isn't it special if only you could have a child from such a holy person? So that was the headspace here. Any other questions? This is pretty radical stuff. So definitely, not very conventional. Okay. And again, also based on the grammatical thing, again, just as Naomi said, when you anoint yourself, my merits are being anointed with you. When you dress, my merits are dressing you. She was also saying the same thing when you lie down. When you lie down, no, you're not alone. I'm going to be lying down with you. Spiritually, I'm going to be there with you. I know I'm asking you to do something. I know I can't go with you, but I'm going to be with you in any way I can, that really you're not going to be alone in this crazy thing I'm asking you to do. And she's saying, listen, whatever's going to be is going to be. Like, you create the best you can, and we're giving it over to God, which sometimes is what we have to do in life. Sometimes in life there's very hard situations, and you could plot and think and hope and plan, and then you say, listen, God, in the end, as in the beginning, it's all in your hands. So Naomi's not being passive. Again, she had hope during the harvest. Nothing happened. She hoped after the harvest. Nothing happened. She knows she can't approach him directly. She can't send an intermediary to approach him directly. He'd get very insulted, and he'll probably going to say no. She's looking for some very radical way to directly move him that he will do this. And she's saying, listen, we're doing the best we can. At this point, God, we trust you. We're doing all we can. You're going to take care of us at this point. And Ruth replied, all that you say, I will do. Which means Ruth is saying, I don't know, it's pretty crazy. I know Jewish women are supposed to be very modest. That's what I've been trying to do for the past 3 months plus 10 years. And now you're telling me to do something like this? I'm trusting you. You're my mother-in-law. You're far older than I am. You're far more knowledgeable of this whole culture and religion and everything and how God works and how Jews work. You're telling me to do this. I'm not saying it makes any sense to me. I'm going to listen to you. So we will stop at that point because it is 5 after 9. I want to do something about Shabbos to be continued next week to find out what happens when she goes to the threshing floor that night. So in the laws of Shabbos, in general, we are supposed to refrain Shabbos in the afternoon from doing work that's not related to Shabbos. So even if you're so organized and your cooking is done and you already took your shower and you already cleaned the house and it's an hour to Shabbos, that's not the time to start, working on some Word doc that's due on Tuesday at work or Monday at work. Well, you have the time. You prepared everything. I mean, you did. Schedule your day differently. In the time closest to the Shabbos, to the Sabbath, that time you're not supposed to be doing work that's not for the sake of the Sabbath. Now, let's say you are a barber. You cut people's hair. And someone's coming to you before the Sabbath, oh, can you give my daughter a haircut? Well, you'd be allowed to do that, even though you're even earning money off of it, because it's understood. She's probably in honor of the Shabbos, she wants her daughter to look nice. So that's also part of preparing. In other words, even though you're working, but you're helping somebody else prepare for the Sabbath, so that's fine. If you're a cook and you're busy before the Shabbos cooking these foods that you're sending to people that are going to be eating on Shabbos, that's also fine, even though you're even working and earning money, because it's still preparing for the Shabbos on some level. But what you're not supposed to do is just do things that are completely extraneous, and you can do them on Sunday, but you've got an hour before the Shabbos, so you might as well take care of them. You're supposed to ideally, the later afternoon, closer to the Shabbos, really dedicated, doing then all the things we've been speaking about these past few weeks we're supposed to do before Shabbos. And I hope, like it was so nice when Chava said last week, how much these thoughts of Shabbos keep her going. And I also am affected by them because I'm saying them. So I remember them for sure. And I hope other people as well. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Bella and Rachel and Chava and Menucha for Mir Hashem celebrating Purim with me. I'm so excited. And I sincerely hope other people can join. So it's an awesome invitation. We will have lots of fun. It'll just be so nice to see people in person. So, you know, if possible, please, please, please let me know and join us for just a nice Purim time together. Have a wonderful week. Purim's not this week. It's in a week from this Friday. So in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
You.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.